So welcome. Today we're going to talk about vaccines. There was an article just, I think, last week about the new, the Moderna vaccine. Or some people call it Moderna, other people call it Moderna. It's a new type of vaccine, which is basically a whole new model. It's actually inserting genetic material. And why is this one important? Because this is the first one coming out of the blocks is for coronavirus. And we've gotten some good news. There was, again, a New England Journal article about it, and we're going to cover that today. Some other interesting facts came out recently on the COVID front. I saw a headline today that said that this week there was one day, excuse me, this week there was one, I had no problems until the live event, and now all of a sudden I got voice problems. Sorry about that. I saw a headline that said on one day this week there were over 10,000 cases in 3 states in one day. I believe it was Texas, Florida, and California. And on that same day, there were 11 cases reported in China. Now, Janice's response was, well, China's for sure underreporting. I would agree with that, but I don't think they could hide even 30,000 cases in a day, let alone the probable numbers, probably in the millions to compare. And I don't think they could hide that many cases. We've got a lot of stuff going on. It did appear to be very politicized for a couple of months. I think as we're hitting this second wave, and it's hitting hard, the politicization of it seems to be calming down at least a little bit, and more focus on this is a big problem and it's not made up. And what are we going to do about it? One of the biggest hopes is vaccines. There's other areas too, antibody or serum, as well as continued development of on the drug front. Now, speaking of that, we've covered repurposing old drugs against COVID-19. We did that about a week ago. Other topics we've covered in the recent YouTube lives would be stem cells as a cure for diabetes. Saturated fats, that has been one of our most popular videos over the past few weeks. What happened was JACC, Journal of the American College of Cardiology, published a meta-analysis. A meta-analysis means a review of all science on a topic. And there's a lot of good science on saturated fats. In fact, there's a whole lot of randomized clinical trials. You can't get better than that. Unfortunately, most dietary epidemiology is what we call environmental studies or relationship studies, which are just very difficult to parse out. And that's why epidemiology of diet is such a mess. But you've got some really good randomized clinical trials with saturated fats. Here's what the meta-analysis showed. For those of you that just want the sound bite, it showed that saturated fats weren't bad. Now, one of the comments that we got a lot of comments on it, and one of them was, well, you didn't tell us that it was good for us. I don't think anybody's saying that they're good. I think people are saying, are they bad or not? Because that's been the assumption for decades, going on 100 years now. And the science is just not weighing that, or just not bearing that out. So again, as you see, we've got plenty of other topics that we've covered recently. Let's go to the next slide. In terms of things that are available, I don't have a slide on this yet. We just had some final discussions about pricing for the conference course. We had a conference in Louisville. It was a 2-day conference. There were about 30 people there. Prices ranged from $500 just to attend up to $3,000 to get a full CIMT and evaluation with it. Jerry Kurth, one of our volunteers, who's done a lot of great work with us, and he's done a very popular video. If you're interested in Jerry's video, it's that was done. We published that about 2 months ago, and it was on his reversal of his calcium score. A very unusual thing. Jerry attended that conference, the Louisville conference, last November, and he recorded the whole thing. So what we did was we took those recordings. Carl and Aspen and the team have spent a lot of time editing the recordings to make it very easy to read, very easy to understand. Chris went through the audio captioning for those videos and created text. So now in many ways, you've got better than the folks that attended in that you've actually got the text to go with it. It's going to be, I think we decided it was going to be like $3.99 for the course, but we've got an introductory offer, and I don't remember what we said. Janice and Michelle are still going through that. I think it's like $2.99, but we'll get some information out for you. Again, it's a great way to attend a conference, get all the information and then some, but not have to go out, travel, and be exposed in a large group. It is the core curriculum for what we do in terms of preventive medicine, prevention of heart attack and stroke. So other things that we've got that we've shared with you before, we've got webinars on the sugar webinar, pre-diabetes webinar. The vast majority of docs don't really go deeply, as deep as we should, in terms of helping patients know whether they're rotting their arteries, causing plaque, causing inflammation. This course is specifically about doing that. If you look at the comments on our channel, each month you'll see more than one person who says, "Yeah, I did your testing, and I didn't have prediabetes. I had full-blown diabetes, and my doctor didn't know that. So I'm really glad that I got tested." That testing is part of that webinar, by the way. So it helps you understand where you are, and it also helps you understand where you are in relation to other people, which is a very unusual thing in terms of medicine. We've got a plaque webinar. We've got plenty of people who've had CIMTs, didn't know how to interpret them. Other people have had positive calcium scores. Getting folks together and talking about what's the next step, how do I evaluate that? Had some good discussion with Todd Eldridge, the co-author on the book, just last night. He's doing hopefully the last edits on the book, and we'll probably go ahead and self-publish rather than go through another 18 months of delay waiting on a. We've had some folks state interest in wanting to take a look at it from to set it up for more of a publisher house thing. We may do that later on a different book, more comprehensive update type of book, but I think we're going to go ahead and get this out. We will, again, keep you posted. As we mentioned, we've got several different webinars out there. One of them we didn't mention was the supplements webinar. We're finally getting that wrapped up and making that available. Just an interesting point. Many people ask me, they say, you know, Doc, you're one of those unusual docs who not only is trained in allopathic medicine, you're faculty at Hopkins, but you understand supplements. And could you just, rather than go through all the science, yeah, the science is interesting, but could you just get us set up on the supplements that you recommend for our conditions? This webinar is a way to do that. So again, please keep posted, and hopefully Michelle and the gang will have that set up to where we can offer that over the next couple of weeks. The subscriptions have been popular. There are a lot of people who say, you know what, I'd like to get a full-blown evaluation. I can't afford that. I can go ahead and set up some prices on a monthly basis, and I'd like to get started with you. This is a great way to do that. A couple of people that are going to be going into Medicare over the next year or so are saying, you know what, I've looked at Medicare docs in my area. I don't have one that knows how to do what you do, and I'm looking for a cost-effective way to supplement my preventive medicine. So that's what that's for. Michelle asked us to announce the website, prevmedhealth.com. Of course, there are still problems with it, but it's a major improvement over what we had before. The bottom line was I never really invested any time or energy or significant money in terms of developing a website before, for a whole bunch of reasons. Never got involved in the SEO, search engine optimization, and all of that stuff. I just decided to go ahead and plop a couple of videos out there to make this kind of information, life-saving information, available to folks for free. It was well received, and again, we're trying to make this something that's easier to look at, easier to take up, and easier to start doing, because we want to save. I mean, we've saved thousands of lives so far. We want to save tens and hundreds of thousands. So, speaking of tens and hundreds of thousands of lives, let's go back and talk about the latest progress on the front-runner vaccine for COVID-19. So, front-runner vaccine, there might be a lot of people that would argue with me on that one. I think it's one of the most interesting vaccines because it's a totally new model. If you're wondering about the different models of vaccines, we covered that, gosh, maybe 2 months ago. There are 4 or 5 models for vaccines. There are contenders for the COVID vaccine in each one of those models. There's probably, gosh, I don't remember from the coverage that we did. I think it was well over 100 vaccines that were being touted and developed. An old standard mechanism for vaccine is to grow eggs and to grow the protein of components of a vaccine in eggs. That takes a long time, and you know that's got issues with people that have egg allergies. Another way to develop a vaccine is to grow the virus and kill it. That's one way of doing it as well. Another model for developing a vaccine is to grow components of a virus or a bacteria. Another one is to grow viruses that have been to set them up on an evolutionary perspective or a change perspective such that they're no longer virulent. They no longer cause disease. Again, there are multiple different ways of growing a vaccine. There are also some what we call a vehicle. You have one vaccine and you put antibodies to or antigens to several different components in there. You can do that as well. This one's different. You're actually putting messenger RNA. That's actually where the name came from. It's a totally new model. Mode RNA is the name, or many people, you look at it and you assume, as an English speaker, that's Moderna. But again, mode RNA is the term I will use most of the time, I think. So let's get to that. Oh, before we get to that, I'll make one other comment. If you look at the headlines in this space, there's another vaccine as well. Somebody fact check me and remind me which company. It's one of the standard pharma manufacturers. They referred to it as a tsunami of volunteers for that vaccine. Over 100,000 volunteers to try their new vaccine. And again, I don't think it was the mode RNA. Here's what we're going to talk about with mode RNA vaccine today. Last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, the New England Journal published an article where they basically talked about the results of the very first phase 1 trial. So let's go to that now. In May, Moderna published interim results from the initial stages of its COVID-19 vaccine trial. They said the vaccine generated immune responses in 8 patients. On July 14th, the New England Journal published a new study showing the promising results of Moderna's phase 1 dose escalation open label trial. We'll talk about that dose escalation in just a minute. Basically, it was 45 healthy adults, age 18 to 55. They were split into 3 groups of 15 each. Again, pardon my voice. Today, I'm getting a significant tickle. 3 groups, 15 each, test doses of 25, 100, and 250 micrograms. They were given a second dose at the same amount 28 days later. After the first vaccination, antibody titer levels were found to be higher with higher doses. After the second round, antibody levels further increased, much higher than seen in most patients that got infected with COVID-19 and had gone on to generate their own antibodies. So again, very promising results, at least from the antibody perspective. For those of you who are science geeks, interested in what's going on, this, just a couple of things. These are antibodies and the amount of antibodies seen post-dose. This first amount is a lower amount pre-dose. Then you start seeing increases as further doses are given. I'm not going to go into detail on that because the vast majority of us would it would wear thin. Out of 45 participants, 3 did not receive the second dose. 1 in the 25 microgram group had urticaria on both legs. Urticaria is a sign of potential immune response, which it's redness, bumps, welts on the legs. That's an IgE response. It's an immune response, which can sometimes lead to anaphylaxis. So when they saw that on the legs, they said, nope, no more of this, this antigen, this vaccine for that person. 1 in the 25 microgram group and 1 in the 250 microgram group missed their second vaccination window due to isolation for suspected COVID-19, but their tests later returned negative. Side effects. None of the participants had fever after the first vaccination. After the second vaccination, no participants in the 25 microgram group, 6 or 40% in the 100 microgram group, and 8 or 57% in the 250 microgram group reported fever. 1 in the 250 microgram group had fever up to 39.6 centigrade, so that's significant fever. In more than half the participants, effects included fever, chills, headache, myalgia, and pain at the injection site. So, you know, that's pretty classic for what we see with vaccine side effects and responses. Local adverse events, when present, were nearly all mild or moderate. And if you remember, that sounds like less of a reaction than the more recent vaccines for mumps, measles, rubella. Oh gosh, again, another senior moment. But there's a new vaccine that's out for us older folks. It's for Zoster, the Zostavax vaccine, the ZIG, the new vaccine. Much, much bigger adverse effects than what we're seeing, at least on the first phase 1 trials for the Moderna vaccine. The Moderna vaccine belongs to a new class of vaccine, as we mentioned. It uses genetic material, or RNA, messenger RNA, to encode the information needed to grow the virus's spike protein inside the human body. The advantage of this technology is that it bypasses the need to manufacture viral proteins in the lab. Well, that then creates a whole new opportunity. It takes months off of the standardization process and helps ramp up the time frame on mass production for the vaccine. The speed with which this vaccine has been developed is remarkable. From publication of the first SARS-CoV-2 sequences through phases 1 in 6 months, as compared with a typical timeline of 3 to 9 years. So let me repeat. Usually it takes 3 to 9 years from development of a sequence, a genetic sequence of a virus, to phase 1 trials. For this one, they did it in 6 months. So what can they do the next 6 months? The rapid pace of development of vaccines against COVID-19 has been enabled by several factors. Prior knowledge of the role of the spike protein in coronavirus pathogenesis and or disease causation. Evidence that the neutralizing antibody against this spike protein is important for immunity. So you remember, you heard a lot of discussion about the spike protein. It was associated with the receptor in the cell membrane. And that spike protein, again, has been unique to that virus. It's the ACE2 receptor. And again, there's been multiple iterations and concerns about that, starting with the thing of, oh, anybody on ACE inhibitors. And again, we've been through that drama and we're beyond that. But this is the protein that we're talking about, that spike protein. The evolution of nucleic acid vaccine technology platforms has, again, been a major enabling factor for the speed of this vaccine development. Development activities can be conducted in parallel now rather than sequentially without increasing risk for study participants. So again, major differences, major developments, and as I've mentioned many times before, Tony Fauci has said it takes 18 months minimum to get a vaccine out there. His boss, Francis Collins at the NIH, has said, you know what? I'm banking more towards less than 12 months, maybe even this coming January. Personally, I'm more in Francis Collins's camp. I think we're going to have some stuff that's available earlier than the Fauci prediction. So what's next? ModRNA said it would enter the final stage, phase 3, on July 27th. The study should run until October 27th, 2022. The phase 3 trial will recruit 30,000 participants in the US, with half to receive the vaccine at 100 microgram dose levels, and the other half to receive a placebo. The safety and immunogenicity, and immuno meaning immune system, and genicity meaning to make. So the ability to make an immune response. The safety and immunogenicity data of the phase 1 trial are promising. They support continued development of this vaccine. However, bear in mind the complexity of vaccine development and the work still to be done before vaccines are widely available. Many phase 3 studies failed because of incorrect identification of a dose that best balances safety and efficacy. You remember we said we were going to talk about this. What's the best dose in terms of development of an effective antibody, but not so many side effects? The 250 microgram dose did not appear to be associated with markedly higher antibody titers than the 100 microgram dose, but it was associated with a higher proportion of severe systemic adverse events. So another special dosing consideration is age. Immune functions that decline with age and that are likely to be responsible for the greater risk of severe COVID-19 in older adults may also lead to poor vaccine response. So just as a reminder, there are flu vaccines now which are specific for the older adult. They have more antigen in them to create more of a reaction. As I mentioned with the new, it's not Zostavax, there's another name for it, but the new zoster vaccine, much higher reaction. It's got a what's called an adjuvant, ADJUVANT. That's a chemical which is not the antigen itself, but it helps stimulate an antigen response. That's why the new Zostavax has so many more side effects. And again, that goes along with increasing antigenicity, as you see over and over again. So, Aspen, you want to show the video?
As the coronavirus continues to spread across the globe, the pressure is on for drug makers to develop a vaccine and bring it to market quickly. Vaccines are preventative medicines. They help reduce the risk of catching certain illnesses. They do this by imitating infections. They introduce dead or weakened versions of the disease-causing germs, known as antigens, into the immune system. When the immune system detects these foreign invaders, they create antibodies to attack them. And because our immune system is like a library, it stores information and remembers every germ it's ever defeated. So, if we encounter the real germ in the future, our immune system can quickly trigger the memory cells and produce antibodies to defeat it. Unfortunately, it takes quite a bit of time to develop, license, and release a new vaccine, ranging from several months to over 10 years. Once vaccines are developed in a lab, they must go through 3 phases before they come to market. First, small groups receive the trial vaccine. Then it's given to a larger group of people. And finally, it's tested on hundreds of thousands of people. Some experts say there's a 94% failure rate in developing a new vaccine from the discovery phase to licensing. The Food and Drug Administration will license it only if it's proven to be safe and effective, and if the benefits outweigh the risks. But the vaccine might not be worth the effort. Many viruses mutate, so a vaccine that works one year might be less effective or not work at all the next. Today, there's no working vaccine for HIV, malaria, or tuberculosis. So these diseases continue to kill millions around the world each year. But vaccines have led to the eradication of smallpox, a drastic reduction in polio, and progress towards eliminating tetanus.
Dave Cantor once said that it wasn't clear when we went from the program into Q&A. So that's why we gave you that little clip to emphasize. We're going away from the program now and into more of a Q&A section. We had a hello from Germany, Amer Al-Gayer. Hello, thanks for joining us. Dave Murphy joined with a good morning. And Dave talked a little bit about where he is right now. 97% oxygen saturation, 70 beats per minute, afebrile. Blood glucose 75 after a 66-hour fast. Dave shared before that he's doing a lot of prolonged fasting, I believe once a week now. He's doing this work with Dr. Boz. He's got a Dr. Boz ratio of 16/3. Lost 2 more pounds, 4 pounds left to go. And Dave did a video for us recently. It was very interesting and very popular. It was, I believe at the point of the time of that video, it was 135 pounds lost, something like that. And Dave had shared in that video, he had tried several different ways of losing weight. When he dropped the carbs, that's when he started making permanent progress. Then he started doing different types of fasting, intermittent fasting, closing that time restricted window, eating window from 12, 16 hours down to 8, down to closer to 6, and then 4, and then 2 in some days. He also shared that he started doing a lot of prolonged fasting. As you see here, again, 66 hours fasted so far. So thank you again so much, Dave, for sharing that. It's making a contribution to other people. in terms of seeing, you know, what David said is, and you see this, this is not just a behavioral, I get used to it, behavior-wise issue. It's a physiologic, it's a metabolic issue. After you start doing prolonged fasting, or even just intermittent fasting, closing that that eating window, your body gets used to that. It develops an adaptation and begins to expect that. So it's not nearly so hard after you've tried it a few times. So yeah, it's hard the first couple of times, but it gets a lot easier. Dave Murphy, this is my 9th 72-hour weekly fast. Numbers are looking pretty good. Yes, they are, Dave. Thank you so much for sharing it. Probably go back to OMOD. Anybody not remember what OMOD is? 1 meal a day. So again, very impressive, Dave. I really enjoyed the feedback I get from the Freestyle Libre. Thanks so much for sharing that. For those of you who don't remember or haven't seen it, we've covered it many times. It's just a little plastic button that you put on the back of your arm. I have done many videos on Libre. Just go to our YouTube channel and look up Ford Brewer YouTube Libre, L-I-B-R-E. It's continuous glucose monitoring. Now, some people get frustrated with it because it's not as good as a finger stick, usually, and it's not as good as another continuous glucose monitor. The other big one in the space is the Dexcom 6. Now, the Dexcom 6 is, what, $350 for an applicator and another $350 for the needle component itself. It's expensive. This one is between 40 and 75 bucks for that little button, and it gives you 2 weeks of 24 hours, 7 day a week, 14 days of monitoring your glucose. So you get some really interesting information from this. Do you know what your blood sugar is right now? Are you monitoring it? Have you ever monitored it? It's, as Dave said, very, very important information. In terms of your health, if you go back and begin to realize and think that the majority of plaque, the majority of heart attack and stroke and blindness and kidney disease is due to prediabetes, diabetes, and prediabetes. And then you begin to acknowledge that, well, you know what? Most people don't ever know what their blood sugar values are. And very few people know what their pattern is over a 24-hour period. We're flying blind. It's like a much needed component to our health dashboard. So thank you again, Dave, for sharing that. Again, hello from Germany, Bart Robinson. Good morning from the extreme heat in South Jersey. Dave Murphy, a friend with a relative in a neighboring state that works in a hospital. They sent in 30 COVID tests, opened, but not actually tested on anyone. All came back positive. Oh my goodness. Testing error or fraud? I don't know. That's a really good question. As you know, I'm doing a lot of work with a fellow named David Vigorous and another fellow named Stefanos Kalis. David Vigorous is a virologist, world-class lab scientist, trained at Vanderbilt, faculty at Vanderbilt. He's working a lot on the COVID testing components. That's a part of what we're doing with our consulting group. Stefanos Kalis is a physician at Harvard, doing a lot of the return to work testing and safety for Harvard's Beth Israel and Brigham and Women's hospitals, and both of them are doing a lot of work on this in this area. And yeah, there's a lot of challenges in the COVID-19 testing area. Batterio, are you going to talk about Kill Gates? Is that a typo or? No, I'm not. I don't plan on talking about Bill Gates today. Sorry, meant to say Bill. Sorry for the triple chat. No, so thank you for the apology. Obviously, this is not wasn't sarcasm. I don't plan on talking about the 2020 initiative. Maybe we can do that in a later video. Frankly, I'm not familiar. Obviously, I'm familiar with Bill Gates. I'm familiar with a lot of the work that he's done in terms of. I mean, he's a computer entrepreneur, but he's done multiple videos on pandemic preparedness, and including, I covered a lot of his work on pandemic preparedness in the initial COVID-19 pandemic. I tend to steer away from the political stuff. For example, I'm not talking a lot about the lockdown, shutdown, whatever you want to call it, once it became so politicized. Well, Bill Gates, because of the stance that he's taken on a lot of these things, has become a very politicized name out there. So if there's content around the 2020, ID 2020, I'd be very interested in taking a look. Sam Gold, don't take vaccines. You know, it's interesting. I was talking with a friend of mine who's actually run some genetic labs, built and run some genetic labs recently. We were talking about the vaccine just before the video today, and I was talking about the tsunami of volunteers, and he said, well, that won't be me. And I said, that's interesting. I said, are you an anti-vacciner? And he said, no, I'm not an anti-vacciner, but I'm just a little bit nervous about rushing. And I know they're doing a lot of rushing right now. Art Berry, hello. Sam Gold, DARPA's hydrogel penetrates the blood-brain barrier. Art Berry's not a vaccine fan either. And again, you know, it's so interesting. Even vaccines have become extremely politicized. Not going to get into a whole lot of the politics behind vaccines. And yes, there are side effects. You go back to the pre-vaccine world, though, it was a very different world. Robert Simpson, good morning. Baterio, trust me, there are 30,000 idiots being guinea pigs. Wait until 3 to 5 years after phase 3 trials are done. Don't trust the media and doctors in general. Baterio, I am a doctor. Not sure why you're attending the meeting unless you just want to start bombing it. Chuck K. Hi, Doc. I've seen concern regarding mercury in vaccines. Is there a valid concern? Mercury is a valid concern for some vaccines, mostly for people who have some specific allergies to some of the mercury-based preservatives. Joe Riley, no. I'm going to skip over Baterio and Art Berry. You know, you guys, you've made your opinion very clear. Dave Murphy, $10 super chat. Thank you so much, David. Thanks to you and the team for keeping us updated and informed. And thanks to you, Janice, and the entire team for your help on my road to better health. Thank you so much, Dave. You know, doing what we do for a living, it's very exciting to have someone take control of their health, to take back control. Thank you so much. And again, these contributions make a big difference. A lot of our work is done by folks on the Filipino team, and $10 is significant. Joe Riley, ZV1, $9.99. Thank you so much. And it looks like you're looking good. 96% oxygen saturation. To Brazil. So they insert RNA inside our cells. Yeah, you know, it's interesting to Brazil. It's such a very an interesting mechanism. I keep meaning to go into more detail on the mode or the mechanism for the mode RNA vaccine. It's, again, messenger RNA. I'm going to skip over Baterio. You've had enough airtime. Robert Simpson, even after a vaccine is made, are there going to be a large population that will not get it because they don't trust it? Yeah, I mean, you're seeing a couple of guys come on and try to bomb the comment section with just that agenda. Joe Riley, are there advantages to taking multiple vaccines? Oh, if you mean multiple vaccines for one disease, I think I would I would be careful about that, because you never know what kind of cross reactions you're going to get, with immune reactions developed already by one vaccine, and then inject related stuff. Okay, thanks, Art and Baterio. Bart Robinson, I'm not one of the anti-vaccine crowd, but if they rush something out, no way I am getting it yet. Well, that was my point a minute ago. The gentleman that I was talking about is a very well-informed gentleman, and here's the thing. This is an old saying in medicine. I had very senior guys, even when I was in med school, talk about, there's a great analogy. Don't be the first to try a new treatment, for obvious reasons. And unfortunately, don't be the last. I mean, again, we've got way too many people who are still back in the fasting glucose and hemoglobin A1C days of diagnosing diabetes, and that's killing a lot of people. To Brazil, adjuvants are poison. They're used to boost an artificial immune response. Thank you, Tube. John Tocho, nice live stream this morning. Thank you so much, John. I appreciate that. Teresa Cesario, I check mine 4 times a day with a stick. Journal all I eat and what time I eat. Thank you, Dr. Brewer. Robert Simpson, how long will a COVID-19 vaccine offer protection? You get a whole lot of information. We did a video on that specific issue. There's limited precedent right now. There's 2 or 3 different trials of antibody protection, where they looked at other relatives within the coronavirus group, and they had some limitations. One of them was for several years, but not 100%. Another one was for just a couple of years. But here, think about it. For a disease that's causing the devastation that this one's causing, let's say it only decreases the virulence of the disease by 50%, and it only lasts 2 years. Can you imagine the impact of decreasing the COVID-19 cases, or the fatality rate, by 50%, and creating significant that much of an impact for 2 years? That would be huge. So I'm not too worried about how long it offers protection and the overall amount. And trying to get a permanent, I'm not too worried about trying to get a permanent protection, or 100% protection, or even 90% protection. I don't think those are practical goals. Your whiskers are a great change. Thank you, Teresa. I appreciate that. Multiple for COVID. Yeah. So, Joe, I would think twice about doing multiple vaccines for COVID. It's sort of like if one's good, then a whole lot's got to be better. Yeah, a whole lot can also have significant increase in risk as well. So I would certainly, I will tell you this: I'm not going to be the first to get any vaccine. I will certainly not be, but I will probably be one of the early ones to get the vaccine once the information starts coming out, if it's good. I will not at all be an early multiple vaccine taker. Again, I'd want to make sure that there's a lot of experience out there before I took more than one vaccine for the same bug. John Tocho, Dr. Brewer, have you seen the BBC article that a study found 40 to 60% of population have COVID resistance even without being exposed to COVID-19? I've seen several articles in that space. Basically most of those start heading towards, well, maybe there was some previous, there was some introduction of COVID-19 prior to the actual knowledge of it. I haven't seen any significant articles about there was no exposure, but yes, there was still resistance. Your next comment is it was related to T cells. That's not entirely surprising, though. You get cross-reactivity of antigens. So if you go back and you think about how does rheumatoid arthritis happen? How does type 1 diabetes happen? How does systemic lupus happen? Well, here's how they happen. Your body gets exposed to some antigen, some foreign body, but then what happens is there's a cross-reaction between the antibodies to that foreign body and proteins or antigens within your own body. So, for example, with rheumatoid arthritis, there's a cross-reaction with the protein in your joints, the DIP joints. That's why that's the classic look that you get with somebody that's got advanced rheumatoid arthritis. Their own immune system has cross-reacted and is interacting with attacking proteins within these specific joints. With lupus, it's anti-nuclear antibody, ANA. With Graves' disease, you're seeing some thyroid antibody, and so there's cross reactions. It's not surprising. I won't be surprised if and when there's some good evidence indicating there's cross reactions going on with the antigens associated with SARS-CoV-2. Carl Jones, have you seen the deaths for Hubei province and Wuhan? How come the US-UK death rate is 6 times Hubei? The data has been rigged. Well, I don't think anybody in there, I haven't seen any Americans yet who would argue that all of the information that comes out of China is valid and that none of it is rigged. Janice's response to the headline that I mentioned earlier about 11 cases in China versus on the same day that there were 10,000 in each of 3 states in the United States. Her perspective was she went straight towards the China underreporting thing. She also linked it to an article that she had read about there being a significant not just underreporting, but under recognition because so many people in China are truly locked up and have limited access to the outside world. So yes, I think if they're having 1 million cases, it would be very difficult to hide those. But again, it's a good point. They have because of the way their government is set up with their people, they have very aggressive lockdown procedures. With us, it's social distancing and some regulations. In China, it's a very different thing. So her perspective was, how would they ever know how many cases they have? Because people aren't able to get out to get it diagnosed. James Cantor, please see my comment above. Okay, it looks like maybe we skipped some. I will try. James, there are so many. Blood sugar was higher this morning, 137 milligrams per deciliter. James, I am trying. I'm looking. I don't see it. I would ask you if you would. I didn't know you were on and don't see it. I'm sorry. Blood sugar was higher this morning, 137. Guess I'm for the human immune system, so stay healthy all. Joseph Page, if we knew a vaccine had a 2-year effective window, could you get revaccinated again after the 2 years passed and have it be effective again? Yes, Joseph. Actually, it's a great question. And thank you for pointing out. I was making an assumption that most people were automatically linking to the term booster. Have you ever heard of booster shots? You know, you go out and you get your childhood shots and then a few years later you get a booster. How about tetanus? What is it? Every 10 years you need to get a tetanus booster. So yes, absolutely. That's my assumption that even if this is only like a 2-year vaccine, which I'm skeptical. I think I'm not going to get into prognostication on that. But even if it's a 2-year vaccine, I'm assuming there will be booster components to it. Robert Simpson, I would think that healthcare workers would be required to take the vaccine whether they trust it or not, unless they want to change professions. You bring up a really good point, Robert, and there's already precedent for that issue and that battle in the healthcare community. This is not the first time that issue has come up. Bart Robinson, another great discussion. Thank you so much, Bart. Thank you for the others. James, just will hang on there for just a second if you want to get that comment out. But there's no search function on here, and we've got, I am looking through, we've got a long string of comments, including a few guys that wanted to really get maybe political and repeat and bomb the thing. Not seeing it, sorry. Thank you so much for your interest. We'll talk to you later.